Yeah.
Hi, I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. So pleased to be with you. The show is live, which means you could join me in the chat room by going to israelnewstalkradio.com and clicking on that button that says chat room. I'll be in the chat room the entire show. You could also call in by going to israelnewstalkradio.com and looking at those numbers on the top of the page. In case you don't want to go that far, I'll give you the numbers. 301 768 4841, 0265 depending if you're calling from North America or from Israel. All right, so I am going to do a show today that is going to be a little confusing for both you and me. Now, the reason it is going to be confusing is because I am going to actually walk back a little bit on a show I did last week. Plus, I'm going to reiterate what I said on the show last week. That's why it's going to be confusing, because I'm going to contradict myself. Because I, I, I'm, I'm, I understand both sides of the issue, and I agree with both sides of the issue. Kind of. So I'm going to contradict myself a little bit, and you could hold me to that, and I think it'll make for an interesting conversation. Of course, we're going to talk about. Well, we're going to look at the specific situation happening in New York with the Hasidic Jews in New York, and the fight that's going on there, and then we're going to expand the concept because I think the concept is more interesting than the actual story. Story is a fascinating story, but the concept's a little more interesting, and that's where the confusion is going to come in. So I'm warning you in advance that I am going to be confused, you're going to be confused, but at the end of the show, it is all going to come together. We're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. So bear with me, call in, be part of the show, join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Call into the show, be part of the show. Let's have a discussion. This will be a lot more fun if we discuss things. So let's have a discussion because what is going on. It's not only in New York. There are cases in Quebec and in Ontario and in New York and in Chicago. There are cases all over North America. But we'll look at all that and call in and be part of the show. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. I'm Howie Soberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being here. We are live, which means you could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call into the show. Please feel free to do that. I'd love to hear from you. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265001551. All right, so last week on the show, I spoke about how, as Jews, we should be following the guidelines that are handed down by the governments for COVID. And the reason we should be doing that, I argued, is because if there's one semblance of a chance, if there's an iota of a chance of saving a Jewish life or saving any life, because life is paramount and saving life is paramount, and we know corona is a deadly virus, so if there's a chance of saving a life, then we as Jews have to do all we can, every little morsel, anything at all that we can do to save lives. And that means sacrificing some Jewish traditions. That means doing what has to be done at the moment in order to save a life. So if the health officials are saying that there are that by gathering in large crowds we are endangering the elderly or the vulnerable or the immunocompromised, then we should not be gathering in large crowds. This is something that we should be following, strictly. We are responsible for each other. We don't live in a bubble. We are not individuals who live in a bubble. We are communities that live together. And because we are communities that live together, it means that our interactions could result in us spreading the disease to each other. So when you have social responsibility, as Judaism teaches us, that social responsibility is an important factor. We have to take care of each other. We have to watch out for each other. We have to take care of each other. It's the whole idea of the story of Cain and Abel, that we have to be our brother's keepers. So here we are, in a situation where for 6, 7, 8 months now, depending where you live, it started earlier in some places, it started a little later in other places. For 6, 7, 8 months now, we have been living under the cloud of COVID-19. It is a deadly disease. It has killed hundreds of thousands of people around the world. It kills mostly people who have underlying medical conditions, mostly people who are elderly. There are certain age groups where the chances of dying from COVID are almost nothing. There are other age groups where the chances of dying from COVID are a little more significant. And that's fine, because we all live together. So we all have to be responsible for each other, and we all have to be responsible for each other's health. So there have been guidelines handed down, both in North America and Israel. There have been lockdowns. I mean, we're all living through this. I don't have to explain to you what's happened with COVID. We are all living through this point in history where the entire world has been affected by this pandemic. I don't know why they're still calling it it's a pandemic, it's an epidemic too. The whole world has been, I'm going to call it a plague, because that's really what it is. The world has been afflicted with this plague. So, here we are. The Jewish, we had a bunch of Jewish holidays that passed already. You had Passover and you had Shavuot, which passed already, and those holidays, most of us spent at home, isolated, living in quarantine, or in lockdown, depending on the situation that you were in, and now we come up to the high holidays, the Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, Sukkot, the Feast of the Tabernacle, and of course Simchat Torah, the Simchat Torah, Shmini Atzeret Simchat Torah, which is the celebration of the finishing of the reading of the Torah, the Jewish Bible. We read it every week, and this is the conclusion of the reading of the Jewish Bible and the restarting of the reading of the Jewish Bible. And normally, Simchat Torah, the holiday, is spent dancing and singing with the Torah. So we take the Torah out, we dance, we sing, and we celebrate. We celebrate the idea, the holiday of finishing the reading of the Torah and starting the reading of the Torah. This year was different. This year, we did not do that. Most synagogues across at least North America, synagogues in Israel, most synagogues were closed for the holiday of Simchat Torah. Most Jews who normally would go to synagogue would stay home. Would stayed home this year and did not dance with the Torah. And we did so gladly because our mission and our goal is to save lives. And if large gatherings is going to risk lives, then we should not be gathering in large crowds. So, most Jews stayed home. But there are segments of the Jewish population that feel differently. That feel that either this is a hoax or feel that they will not be afflicted by this kind of virus, or feel that God makes the decisions on who gets sick, and no matter what we do, everything is predetermined, so it doesn't really matter. But in any case, these segments of the population, and they're very small segments, most of the Jewish population has followed the COVID guidelines for wherever they're living. But this small segment of the Jewish population have decided that they are going to oppose, and they are going to ignore the public health guidelines. Now, last week I told you about Governor Cuomo of New York and the Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York singling out the Jewish community and basically invoking a blood libel against the Jewish community. And this is where I'm going to dial it back a little bit. I know last week I called it a blood libel. This week I'm going to dial it back a little bit because the Jewish community this week in New York City, a segment of the Jewish community, a very religious segment of the Jewish community, the segment that was targeted by de Blasio and Cuomo, decided that they were going to ignore COVID guidelines and gather in large numbers, thousands of people, in synagogues in New York City. One man, a blogger who exposes the underbelly of the Hasidic community, exposes the corruption and the crime in the Hasidic community in a blog that he maintains, decided that this was dangerous, and it is dangerous for the community. He's a member of the community. He's not very well liked in the community. He wasn't liked before this, and he's definitely not liked after this. He called the mayor during a live press conference and exposed the community for what they were doing. Reported them to the city, said they are causing a public health risk. He gave the address of the synagogues that were packed with people, and of course his name and what's not. Well, it didn't take 24 hours before thousands of Jewish men were standing in front of his house, screaming and yelling and threatening him, physically threatening him. The riot squad had to come and save this man. Now, I don't mind talking in particular about this story. I understand why the Jewish blogger called the police and called the mayor and ratted out his community. I get it. I understand why the community was a little upset with him for ratting them out. I get that too. And I understand the concept of Masira, the concept that comes from Europe, where you're not supposed to turn Jewish people into secular governments and secular police forces because in Europe they were persecuted. But we're not living in Europe anymore. But I understand that concept, and that concept is very strong in some religious communities. So I get that too. So I understand all the sides of this, and I agree with all the sides of this. I agree that it's very difficult to not dance with the Torah on Simchat Torah. I agree. It's extremely difficult, and I agree that if you could, and I agree that if you could find a way to do it, then you should find a way to do it. But I also agree that public health regulations have to be followed. That we have to be able to save each other. And I also understand that the optics are very important. And the fact that the Jewish community was being scapegoated to start with, to give the kind of optics that these people gave on Simchat Torah, is actually is actually counterproductive and just feeds the fodder to the religious haters. So I understand both sides of the story. I want to hear what you have to say. Give me a call. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265 I am Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. And I understand that the optics are important because we are supposed to be shedding a light upon the nations. And when we do things that violate that light onto the nations, when we do things that make people look badly at us, then we must understand that we are promoting the anti-Jewism. We are promoting Jew haters to hate us. And that's unacceptable. As a community, we should not be doing that. We should not be giving fodder to the haters. We should not be giving them ammunition to fire at us. It's almost as bad as the Israelis giving guns to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. It's a bad idea. So we shouldn't do that. And I think that the Rebbes have been very clear, like most of the rabbis have been very clear on following COVID regulations. And I think that we should be encouraging our Orthodox communities to do the same. I'm Howie Silberger, this is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation is always fascinating. You could also call into the show. The show is live. In North America, the number is 305-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 026500-151. So Jews, Orthodox Jews, in different cities have been violating the COVID regulations. Some of their rabbis have been saying it's a scam and that even masks aren't necessary. This is a direct violation of Jewish law. And it is disgusting, and it should not be tolerated. In fact, it's condemnable, in my opinion. Let's go to some comments that we got online here. Obeying the law of the land is halacha, is it not? So it's Jewish law, is it not? Now's not the time to be dancing in the streets, even if it was Simchat Torah. When you have an anti-Semite communist mayor like de Blasio, it's even more important to stay quiet. They follow, and of course, the religious communities follow a lot of the rabbis who say it's all a big scam and that nobody should wear masks at all, etc. This is from Jason, and Jason, you are 100% right. It is Jewish law that we should not be putting other people's lives in danger. We should be following the laws of the land. So the laws of the land are that we were supposed to not dance in the streets. So many Jews, in fact, I'd say the majority of Jews did not. But there's always that 10 or 20% that just don't want to listen. They just don't want to listen, and they give the rest of Judaism bad name. We see this in a lot of different things. Politically, you see it when you have 3% of a movement that are violent radicals breaking windows and burning down buildings, and gives the whole movement a bad name. We've seen it over and over again in the last few months where things have happened that have given hundreds of thousands of people, of good people who are out there trying to do their best, a bad name. And in this case here, this gives Jews a bad name, and it gives the Jew haters an excuse to hate Jews. So here we have a situation in New York, and the situation in New York is really what tipped the boat for me. I wasn't going to talk about this today, but this tipped the boat for me. Because here you have a Jewish informant in New York who went and informed on his own community. And he should be praised for doing that, by the way. He should not be condemned for doing that. I've seen a lot of condemnations for this man, but this man should be praised for doing it, because he is trying to save the lives of his community. And if the community is putting lives at danger, going to public health and going to the city and saying, hey, listen, my community is putting my life, my kids' lives, and all their lives in danger, then you guys should do something about it. I'm all for that. At the same time, I understand that the people who are upset because a Jew should not be going to public authorities and complaining about the Jewish community. But then the Jewish community should be acting morally and should be doing what is morally right. And in this case, what is morally right is following the COVID regulations, whether you agree with them or not. Why is that morally right? Because even if they are false, even if wearing a mask is absolutely pointless, even if that is the case, but if wearing a mask could save one person, or has the potential to save one person, because some droplets in your mouth did not go somewhere else and did not hit somebody else and infect somebody else, even if it has the potential, even a minute potential of saving one life, then we should be wearing the mask. There shouldn't even be a question about it, because this is the goal. The goal is to save lives. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. There is a community. We'll go around North America just because it's been very well reported. There was an incident in Chicago where an ultra-Orthodox community, where a major religious community, also gathered 1,500 people in their synagogue for Simchat Torah, and the police came and broke it up. And then the leaders of that community went out and said that the police were anti-Jewish because they broke up a religious ceremony. But wait a second, the guidelines in Chicago at the time were that 20 people were allowed to be in the room, but they had 1,500 people. So is that really anti-Jewish, or is that just enforcing the rules and the guidelines for what is going on, for what was going on at the moment? In Quebec, 1,500 people went to a synagogue. Notice it's always like 1,000, 1,500 people going to these synagogues in one of the communities in Quebec. And the police went in and broke it up again. Now, we spoke about a Chabad community last week that did the same thing. So why is it so hard? And if you're a member of one of these communities where there were large gatherings in synagogues and you didn't get broken up by the police, or maybe you did, you could call in and we could talk about this. Why is it so hard for these communities to understand that if we sacrifice now for just a little while, we could get over this hump and then things could start slowly going back to normal? Why is it that we have to be defiant? Nobody's going to tell me what I can and can't do. Why do we have to be defiant? I understand years and years and years of persecution. I understand years of religious communities being told, you are not allowed to gather, you're not allowed to pray. I understand that. But that's not the situation that's happening right now. We are not going back right now to Nazi Germany. This is not Nazi Germany. This is a public health crisis. There is a difference between a public health crisis and oppression because they hate your religion. There is a huge difference between the two of them. And we have to differentiate it. We can't allow ignorant leaders of communities to call anti-Jewism and to burn the word again. And to burn relationships between the Jews living in the diaspora and their neighbors. We can't allow that to happen, because if we do allow that to happen, and if we do allow these leaders to get away with not following public health guidelines and putting everybody in jeopardy, and we do allow mobs of angry Jews to attack a Jewish guy because he turned in the community because they weren't following the guidelines, if we allow all this to happen, then we are only encouraging the Jew haters, and we're only giving them ammunition to hate us more. We are perpetrating the hatred upon our own community. And to me, that is unacceptable. And no, this is not the same situation as saying that somebody who got raped because they were dressed that way. That's not the same situation. And I know somebody's gonna email me or send me a message saying, "Hey, Howie, but no, that's not right. It's not a good analogy." In this situation here, where it is so easy, spiritually hard, emotionally hard, but very physically easy to follow the protocols for a month or 2 months or however long it takes to get over the hump, where it's so easy to follow the protocols and then being defiant against the protocols, we are inviting Jew haters like Bill de Blasio, Jew haters like Andrew Cuomo, to be official Jew haters and to point the finger at the Jewish community and send the haters straight to us. We're encouraging it. And that's the issue I have. That is the problem I have. Is that when the Jewish community starts getting attacked by the Jew haters, everyone's going to yell, "Oh my gosh, look, again in New York, Jews are being attacked by non-Jews. Oh my gosh, where are the police? Where are the government?" And then if you look back and you trace it back, you'll realize that the Jews are being attacked because the government pointed fingers at the Jews because the Jews weren't following the rules. That is the issue. That is the problem. In my opinion, that is the root of the issue. I understand how hard it is. I understand how difficult it is. I understand how every fiber of my being doesn't want to follow the guidelines. I get it. But I also know people who were inflicted with COVID. I know people who are still in the hospital on ventilators with COVID. I understand the danger of the disease. And I understand that the only way to get over the disease, the only way to pass through this pandemic and end this thing once and for all, is to sacrifice a little bit to benefit the entire community. And what bigger mitzvah, what bigger good deed could we do than protect each other? What good is praying? What good is banging your chest and praying for forgiveness and begging God for life when you are potentially taking life from somebody else? I don't understand the concept. So if someone could explain it to me, please feel free to call in. In North America, 305-768-4841. In Israel, 02650051. Join me in the chat room. I'm in the chat room the entire show on Israel News Talk Radio. I really would like to speak to somebody. I'd like to hear from somebody who could explain this to me. Because to me, saving a life is paramount to anything else. To me, that is the essence of Judaism, is life. I'm Howie Soberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. I'm Howie Soberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm in the chat room for the entire show. The conversation's always interesting in the chat room. Feel free to jump in there and join us in the conversation. You can also join me in conversation right here on the radio. You can call in. In North America, the number is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265000151. You can call. You can get those numbers, by the way, if you didn't write them down, which I'm sure you didn't. You can get those numbers by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, and they're right there on the top of the page. So it's nice and easy to get the numbers and call in. All right, so let me clarify something because I don't know if I've been very clear on this. I said that I said that we have to follow the guidelines, and I know the guidelines have been they've been sliding. It's been a long time, and first they told us don't wear masks, and they told us to wear masks, and they said lockdowns work, and now the CDC has come out and said lockdowns don't work. So I know it's been very confusing. The guidelines have been very confusing and have been contradictory. And I think the fact that they've been contradictory the way they have been is one of the issues that face the religious community. And they say, hey, look, if they can't get their act together, you can't expect me to follow something that makes no logical sense. I understand that concept, and really, I really think lockdowns don't work. I mean, the CDC agrees with me now. I've been saying this for a while, that I think lockdowns do not work. But then again, I do believe that masks help. I do believe that distancing yourself socially by not standing right next to somebody or right in somebody's face, that helps. I do believe that that washing your hands often and changing your mask helps. And if these little things help, and we could stop the spread of this disease as much as possible, then then I'm sure that within months we could start heading back into normal life. And that's really where I want to get back to. I want to get back to normal life. But when thousands of people gather in a synagogue and most of them aren't wearing masks, and most of them, well, it's almost impossible for them to have been socially distanced, for them to have been distanced, physically distanced. If that's the case, and they're spreading it to each other, and then they're spreading it to the rest of the Jewish community and to the rest of the other communities living around them, then it's just an endless cycle of, okay, I have the virus, now you have the virus, now he has the virus, now she has the virus, now we have the virus, now everybody has the virus. It's just an endless cycle of spreading. And that is unacceptable. We shouldn't accept that. And we should not be encouraging that. Now, I really believe, and I know that they've done this, and I think they should do it again, instead of pointing fingers at the Jewish community, instead of showing pictures of religious Jews at press conferences, Mayor Bill de Blasio of New York City and Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York City, instead of passing a blood libel against the Jews, what they should be doing is meeting with the rebbes, the chief rabbis of these Jewish communities, and asking these chief rabbis to control their communities. Communities, these religious communities work like herds, and the rabbis are the ones who control the communities. So if you want to get the community to follow the guidelines, you want people to actually listen, if the rabbi says it, the community listens. So in order to get these communities to follow the guidelines, you have to meet with their rabbis. And I think that's really the next step that these politicians should do. Pointing fingers at them and telling people to report on them, and showing their picture at a press conference is just blood libelous. And I said that last week. I'll say it again this week. It's promoting blood libels, and it's encouraging Jew haters to go and attack the Jewish community, and that's unacceptable, and that can never be accepted by any Jew. But at the same time, it's also unacceptable that the Jewish community is not following the COVID guidelines. So you see, I told you you'd be confused because I'm going back and forth. And I agree with both sides, and both sides are correct. But I also believe that one side has to be a little more proactive in protecting themselves and their community. So we had 1,500 people in Chicago, 1,000 people in Quebec. You had 1,500 people in New York. If we go across the United States, if I could go to every state, and the same story. The ultra-Orthodox communities, the religious communities, are not taking the COVID guidelines seriously. And I have always been the biggest offender of these communities. But in this case here, it's condemnable. In this case here, they're putting my life and your life, and my freedom and your freedom in danger, and that's not acceptable. And I really believe that it's time that we speak up about it. It's time that we say it is unacceptable, and we are not going to take it. Not as our community. If 90% of the community is following the rules, Why do we have to get a bad rap for the 10% that isn't? It's not acceptable. And we shouldn't sit by idly and accept it. Now, I've seen a lot of defense of the Jewish community in New York, and I understand where that's coming from, too. Months ago, we covered it here on the show. Months ago, Jews in New York were being attacked in broad daylight in New York City, and nobody did anything about it. The government didn't care. We understand that the government in New York is not a big fan of the Jewish community. We get that, and you know that's really their problem more than it's the Jewish community's problem. But the Jewish community should be model citizens. When we know that the government doesn't like us, we should be model citizens. We shouldn't give them reasons to notice us. We shouldn't give them reasons to point at us. We shouldn't give them reasons to hate us. Now, some might argue, "Oh, Howie, you're saying that we should alter the way we live because we should appease the Jew haters." No, that's not what I'm saying. Not at all. What I am saying is that we could live our lives, we could defy the Jew haters, and still protect each other during a global medical pandemic. That is what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that we could be defiant against Jew hatred. We could stand up and defend ourselves. We could fight back when we have to, and there are times where we have to. There are times where violence is more than acceptable in fighting back to protect Jews. And we could also protect our communities and protect ourselves and protect our children and protect our elderly and protect everybody around us. One is not mutually exclusive to the other. We don't have to give up one in order to do the other. But by not doing the protecting the community, by following medical advice, by not doing the medical part of it, we are encouraging the hatred part of it. And that's really the message I wanted to get across today, because I don't think that too many people have verbalized this. People are afraid to talk. I'm never afraid to talk, but people are afraid to talk. And I don't think people have verbalized this succinctly. I don't think anybody's analyzed this and said, "Hey, listen, this is what's going on, and we could change the situation by changing the way we behave." I've seen people. I've seen people. They've been supporting the attack on the blogger who ratted out the community. They've been supporting physical attacks on the guy, and that's wrong too. If his goal was to protect his community, if his goal was to turn them in because they were violating rules, and the rules are there to protect society, then he should not be attacked. He should be praised. He should be put up on a pedestal and thanked. He shouldn't be attacked. People who go out of their way and put themselves in dangers to protect other people should be praised. They are heroes. They're not villains. People who disregard the rules and become super spreaders, as they say, those should be considered the villains. We live in a backwards world. We live in a world where toppling statues and burning down buildings is virtuous, and standing and upholding laws is villainous. The world has flipped itself upside down, and the Jewish community has caught up to that flipping. We're living in a very scary and sad situation where law and order suddenly is bad, and anarchy and violence is somehow good. The situation in the world has really toppled over onto its head. And unless moral people stand up and fight to return to some kind of normalcy, unless moral people get up and say, "Hey, look, I prefer law and order over anarchy. I prefer following the rules and living a normal life, happy and free, rather than an anarchist burning down my building and beating me up because I said something or I did something they don't like." When that's the way the world used to work. Not that long ago. But we've kind of lost it. The world has kind of lost it. And unless moral people stand up, more moral people stand up and start demanding that we move back there. Start holding people accountable for their actions, not by violence, but holding people accountable for their actions, the good and the bad. Until we start doing that, we are going to be left in this situation of anarchy, chaos, and pure evil. Listen, I want you to be safe. I want to be safe. I want you to be safe. I want to go back to normal life. I just want things to go back to normal. I don't think it's asking for too much. It was normal just a couple of months ago. The only way to do it is with your cooperation. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. See you next week.